Okay, can you hear us? So welcome to everyone here. We're so delighted to have this special event this evening with Stephane Hessel. I am Shani Peer. I'm the director of the Maison Francaise here at Columbia University. We're happy to welcome so many of you here tonight. And it's a great honor for us to welcome Stephane Hessel as a special guest of the Columbia Maison Francaise. Mr. Hessel is here with us tonight to celebrate and to talk about the English translation of his book, Indignez-vous, which has just been translated into English as Time for Outrage, Indignez-vous, and has been published by 12 Hachette Book Group. He has, of course, led a long and rich and very engaged life. I can only hit on some of the milestones of that remarkable life in introducing him. Stephane Hessel is 93 years old. I believe he'll be turning 94 next month. He was born in Germany in 1917 in the midst of war, and the same year as the Russian Revolution, which was perhaps meaningful for what would come in his life later. And he moved to France with his parents and brother in 1924. He grew up in a very artistic household. Family friends included Marcel Duchamp, Alexander Calder, and Walter Benjamin. He was naturalized as a French citizen in 1937, though his citizenship would be taken away temporarily in July 1940 when the Vichy government revoked naturalizations that had been granted since 1927. Mr. Hessel began studies at the École Libre des Sciences Politiques and had just entered the École Normale Supérieure when the Second World War broke out. He was mobilized at the outbreak of what's called the Phony War and was captured by German forces after the French defeat. He escaped and found his way back to Marseille, where he rejoined family members. There he befriended the American Varian Fry, who managed to arrange U.S. visas for his new wife and her parents, as well as for hundreds of other French artists and intellectuals. And Mr. Hessel left France via Algiers to go to London to join Charles de Gaulle and the Free French Forces. In early 1941, he was captured by the Gestapo on a resistance mission in Paris in 1944. He was interred first in the Buchenwald concentration camp, where he narrowly escaped a death sentence, and was then transferred to several other camps during the war, and managed to escape from a train headed to Bergen-Belsen in April 1945, where he met up with American troops and rejoined the fight. After the war, Stephane Hessel joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and began an accomplished career as a diplomat. His first assignment was in New York with the newly founded UN, where he participated in the drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And he's held a variety of diplomatic positions, including French ambassador to the UN, and been appointed to a number of key government commissions, including the High Authority for Audiovisual Communication and the National Committee on Human Rights. His many distinctions include Grand Officer of the Legion of Honor and the North-South Prize from the Council of Europe. Mr. Hessel has always also been a fierce advocate for human rights and for social justice, whether this is advocating in favor of the sans-papiers, undocumented immigrants, or the sans-logis, homeless, and has taken up the cause of Palestinians living in Gaza as a human rights issue as well, and been a forceful critic of Israel for its treatment of Palestinians. Most recently, of course, Mr. Hessel has become front page news as the author of Indignez-vous, which was initially inspired by a speech he gave to commemorate the French resistance. It was published in October last year. I think the initial run was 8,000 copies, but it soon became a runaway bestseller. More than nearly 2 million copies have been sold in France. It's been translated into 30 languages and sold almost 4 million copies worldwide. And this little tome really seems to have struck a chord in every country that it's been published in. It's inspired youth protest movements around Europe. Maybe it'll inspire one here too. Youth movements that have taken up Indignez-vous as their motto. And we think that his book speaks particularly to the younger generation, and it's one reason it's so nice to see so many students in the audience tonight. So joining me tonight to interview Mr. Hessel is Nikil Saval of N+1, a magazine of politics, literature, and culture founded in 2004 in Brooklyn, which is, of course, the best, greatest borough in Manhattan, or in New York, excuse me. I guess that was Freudian slip. And a literary mecca of the U.S. So we're so glad to have Nikil here. Nikil is also a proud graduate of Columbia. He holds a BA in English and Comparative Literature from Columbia in 2005. I'd also like to thank Brian McClendon and 12 Books Hachette Book Group for publishing this book and for suggesting that we invite Mr. Hessel to Columbia this evening. And thank the Business School for lending us this larger space so that we could accommodate this many people. Before we begin, we do have another special guest who would like to say just a few words about Mr. Hessel's book and its importance and timeliness in the United States. Katrina Vanden Heuvel is the publisher and editor of The Nation and was... and she was the first to write about this book in the American press and to bring it to American readers. So thank you for joining us.
Let me be very brief, but it is a great honor to be here tonight with Stephane Hessel, a voice of humanity and conscience, at a time when such values are so imperiled. In February, The Nation was so proud to be the first to publish in the United States this remarkable manifesto, Time for Outrage. And I would like to tell you that it was my wisdom as an editor that led me to this publishing coup. After all, Indignez-vous, as you heard, had already overtaken the bestseller lists, rising to the top. But the moral here is quite simple and universal. Listen to your parents, especially when you have a remarkable father, as I do, who had the great fortune to be Stephane Hessel's colleague in Geneva, where Stephane was the French ambassador to the UN and my father was his US counterpart. And it was my father, the night in 1978, when I was released off a hijacked plane, and he introduced me to Stephane Hessel, who had been at my father's home for hours, giving solace and friendship. And meeting Stephane that night, I knew that there was goodness in this cruel world. So decades later, when my father told me about this, I knew, and I moved heaven and earth to publish this in The Nation, because Stephane's message is so woven into the fabric of The Nation, a magazine founded by abolitionists committed to the end of slavery, a magazine which has published the words of Martin Luther King Jr. and Albert Einstein and Bertrand Russell and Hannah Arendt, those who have fought for a more just, more peaceful world. And Stephane, you have inspired 93 years younger than any of us, I think. You have forced us to look at today's world and to look at the rapaciousness and to understand that we must engage actively in the defense of human and economic rights. And your words inspired. I love the women in Italy carrying your book in protest against Berlusconi's corruption, or those in the squares in Greece or in Spain protesting the anti-austerity, and to those in our country, in Wisconsin or on Wall Street. And I would just close by saying one of the great things you have done as a citizen of what I sometimes think of as the United States of amnesia. I am so especially grateful to you for calling upon us to remember the best in our history and to defend its highest achievements. In our case, you give strength to those who are fighting the forces in our country, who are intent on repealing the New Deal, the Great Society, even the Enlightenment and reason. So there is a new spark in the world, lit by you, and we await your next book.
Would you like to answer that? Yes, by all means.
But I cannot go up there because I'm bound by my little thing. So I will just stand and first say that to hear Katrina and to have here Melinda and Bill and so many people, I'm sure, that I've known and met It is a great moment for me. I can